I've been an examiner for quite a few years in Taipei and in Australia, in Adelaide, for IDP. So I just want you to know that I have that background, and I've been teaching IELTS for well over 10 years. I've written books for each of the skills in IELTS. So I just want you to have some sort of understanding of all of that. Examiners get trained, so a lot of the training of examiners is how to interpret grading criteria. So we might sort of look at some of the grading criteria with some of the answers too. And you can download this. This is publicly available. I can give you a link if you need it. Then I also want to say this is the publicly available one. Is really, really close to the real version. So if you want to understand some of the things the examiner's thinking about, you can look at this. So if you want to know what do I have to do to get to 7, you can see here, like task response 7 addresses all parts of the task. That's also present down at the 6th level, but the 6th level says although some parts may be more fully covered than others. So imagine a causes solution essay. Maybe the causes are done great, but the solution not so great. Covered, but not covered well. That's a 6. If solutions aren't covered at all, that's a 5. And then the 7 needs all parts to be addressed well. Brings us to the first question. So some of these questions, I don't really have magic answers. I hope you're not too disappointed. Like this one, how to brainstorm ideas in task 2 when the topic is too general and hard. So that means you're already in the test room, right? And you're not able to come up with an effective brainstorm. I don't really have a magic solution for that situation other than do your best. If it's a cause, let's say cause solution essay, do your best to come up with ideas, even if they're not the best ones, as long as you can explain them. So they don't have to be the best ideas, as long as you can develop them. And develop, I mean, maybe explain them, maybe give an example to illustrate. So they don't have to be the best ideas, but you are going to need some ideas. And if you don't have any sort of ideas, then you can't expect a high score. So my main advice would be practice before your test. So a lot of things for the test you need to do before you get into the test room. Once you're in the test room, it's kind of a little bit late. So let's talk just quickly then about how you can get better at planning and brainstorming so that it's less likely to be a problem when you go into the test room. So let me just show you a few questions. So I've got this ebook of like past questions, but you can do it with anything really, any sort of model answer. So what you want is some decent model answers, maybe written by native speakers, but not necessarily, just reliable sources of tasks. And then what you should do is read the task instructions, make your own plan. So don't jump to my plan because you'll minimize your learning. You need to make a plan first about how you would answer this 2-question essay. Ideally, you'd have 2 main ideas. So you brainstorm it, then I've actually got plans so you can have a look at these. So question 1 is about, do you agree that entertainers are paid too much money? And I've got 2 reasons. It's too high for the effort. So the first reason it's too high is not a lot of effort. Well, relatively less. Let's not say that entertainers are lazy. It's just they get millions of dollars and they don't really work that hard, do they? Some cases they do. And then another point is their contribution to society, relatively less than, say, people developing vaccines and things like that for the viruses. And then question 2, I come up with, so what other types of jobs? And I come up with doctors and teachers. Doctors because of their contribution to society, and teachers, they got large responsibilities. Well, I could almost reverse these. So the doctors have the responsibility. Sometimes they're holding people's lives in their hands. But anyway, so you just need to come up with some ideas and then ways to extend them when you come to write your essay. If you're reading a model answer and there's no plan, still go through, make your plan, and then just jump to the essay, have a read, and try and identify what the main ideas are. And are they the same? They might not be exactly the same as you, but are they similar, right? Because a lot of the time people misunderstand the task instructions. Someone might rush this essay and they're so used to this question, maybe they don't even see this one. So they just respond to this one. Well, this is going to be a big problem. That's down to 5 for task response because there's no response to both of the questions. If this is a great response, this one's an okay response. Maybe the only idea is doctors and that's it, and maybe just 3 sentences, then that's going to be enough for 6, but maybe not enough for 7 and certainly not enough for 8. So in this document, I've got about 20 model answers. I'll make that available. So I'll try and send, let me write down things I'm going to send you. So one thing I'll send you is a recording of this lesson, and I'll send you this document, a PDF of different types of essay questions. And so you can go through and work on your planning, right? So really the real answer to this one is practice before your test, right? I don't think I really have a lot else to say except that other point that I had, kind of do your best in the test, and the point that you don't need the, you only need good ideas. They don't have to be the very best ideas. You're not really being assessed on your ideas, but you do get assessed on your ability to develop them. And if you have bad ideas, they can be difficult to develop. And remember, when I'm talking about developing, I mean explaining and illustrating through examples. So you need some sort of ideas that you can explain, that you can illustrate. And if you do all that really well, no reason why you can't get to 8. So a lot of these questions, I can sort of sense that whoever's asking them is worried about something. So here we've got, if the students run out of ideas, is there any good way to get a score? No, not really. But it doesn't mean you're getting a low score for everything. So let's just say you don't do a great job of task response, but all other aspects are okay. So maybe 6 for task response. Let's say everything else is fantastic. Maybe you get 1 8 and 2 7s. You could still get to, say, 7 overall. That's possible. So yeah, I don't have any magic answer. Maybe someone's disappointed. Maybe they wanted to hear, oh, just do this. But it's not so easy. So you're going to have to do your best, and you're going to have to practice this skill. All right, number 3, if I can restate my opinion in the conclusion, but can't summarize the reasons. It's okay for 7 for task response. So a weak conclusion, yeah, you can still get 7 for task response. An 8 is possible maybe, but you're going to suffer some weakness there because there's some language about the opens and closes of essay. So that's about the introduction and conclusion. So hard to get to 8. It's not so great for cohesion and coherence either, because I think the introduction and conclusion are really important for that, the sort of overall structure of your essay. But I think it's still fine for getting to 7. For 8, it puts some pressure. It'll be difficult to get to 8. And then I just kind of wonder why the person asked that question, because this should actually be quite easy. So if we look at an opinion essay, I don't think that should be a really hard thing to do. Well, this is kind of one about the advantages outweighing the disadvantages. That's an opinion essay. So really, if it's especially easy if you've made a plan for any type of essay, because really the summary is already here in your plan. That's why I think the planning's kind of critical, because when we make our plan, that helps us know what to write in the introduction. We know that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages in our introduction. Topic sentence, topic sentence, topic sentence, conclusion, summary. So it shouldn't really be that difficult to do that. What might be difficult is to paraphrase it. Right, the paraphrase might be difficult. Work on that as a skill. If you can't paraphrase it, then just don't. But you can often change the word order or do something like that. If the words are managers, you can change to management. You can change the form of the word. So I don't think that this should be a problem. I only think that the paraphrasing might be. And in that case, you're doing damage to your score, possibly for vocabulary. Some things can't be paraphrased. Computers, it's hard to paraphrase this word, so don't be too obsessed with it. Okay, this one's easy to answer. About running out of time, haven't written a conclusion. Then, yeah, I would sacrifice the second body paragraph and get on to the conclusion, because if you've got no conclusion at all, really horrible for your score for cohesion and coherence. So that might mean that you've only got, so the second body paragraph is short. Let's say it's a 2-question essay. So you've covered your 2 causes, you've written 1 solution. If you could just write 1 sentence with your second solution, if you couldn't, I really think the priority here is to write the conclusion. Show the examiner that you know there should be a conclusion. So I would say write the conclusion. Now, again, as I said, a lot of things can be done before the test. Often people send me essays and they're like 400 words long or even 360 words long. Practice writing your essays, practice using timed conditions sometimes. Make sure that in most cases you can finish a complete essay. So what happens is sometimes people just write too much. There's too much in the body of the essay, so they ran out of time to write the conclusion. Let's say it's a 2-question essay. Instead of having 2 causes and 2 solutions, they've got 4 causes and they only time to write 1 solution, unbalanced. So a lot of it can be avoided by practicing. It could be okay. We've actually got 2 flavors of these essays. So when we come to these discussion essays, we've got 2 flavor. One is, maybe I can show you. I'll try and show you. I'll try and show you and I'll try and explain the difference. So a lot of these questions kind of require detail. Okay, here's a good one. So some people think this, other people believe that. I think that can be fine. There's no requirement from the examiner perspective that you must have 2 views for each. You must have. So I kind of like it. I always plan it right. So this one's about design of buildings. Can the designers, the companies decide, or the government? I quite like having 2 and 2. In general, that's best. I've had the odd student that is really talented at developing ideas, at explaining, at illustrating examples. And I've told them, yeah, okay, you could have 1 and 1. You could just have 1 idea and 1 idea. That could be okay with this type of question, because if we look at the task instructions, there's no requirement to have 2 ideas for each side, right? So you could just have 1 and 1, and that'd be fine. I would try and have it balanced. So it's not so great to have 2 here and 1 here. I like it balanced, but again, it's possible that you have 2 ideas here and then 1 big massive one here. I quite like it when the paragraphs are sort of about the same length. But again, it doesn't absolutely have to be. Then let me contrast this with another type of essay, but I don't know if I can find it. I don't know if it's in here or not. Yeah, okay, just imagine this one. So this exactly the same instructions, but then it adds on and give your own opinion. Now, the problem here is that it says discuss the advantages, plural, and disadvantages, plural. So you see the problem? Now, some of the examiners are going to look at this and say, well, it's asking this in plural, so I want plural. And if you don't give me plural, you haven't followed the task instructions. Then what will the score be based on that? It could be quite drastic. Let me just go back up to here. So it could be a 5 if they think you've only partially addressed the task. I think this would be like the strictest of examiners, and this would be kind of nasty. It could be this one. For me, I think it could still be here. I've actually asked questions when I was an examiner. I asked sort of higher up the food chain to some of the most senior people, and I asked them this exact question, and they told me that the pluralization in the question doesn't matter, and this for this particular question. But the problem is, I had to ask that question, and nowhere in, there's a book of grading criteria, there's nothing in that book that specifically deals with that. So now what we have is an element of risk. There's risk that some examiners, if they're really strict, will give this. More lenient ones might be okay here. It's possible with someone you could still get to 8. So I'm into decreasing risk. So I think you should be practicing according to the instructions and having two ideas, right? To be on the safe side. Now, if you didn't, then you're entering a lottery. There's an element of risk. You might be okay, you might not. So the best thing I can suggest is practice writing in plural. And then, so that comes back up to here. You could just practice writing 1 point, but I don't recommend it, because now you have to remember for one type of this question, one type of discussion essay, 1 is okay. And for another type, you really want 2. So you're having to have 2 systems for the same type of essay. So I think it's better to standardize and just try and have the habit of 2 and 2. So ideally, practice 2 and 2, write 2 and 2 if it comes to the real test, and you have to write 1 and 1 or 2 and 1 idea, you're entering the lottery. So try not to do that. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. If not, then let me know. Tell me now. In terms of the equal length, it's sort of the same. It's better if they're equal length, and practice that way. If in reality it doesn't come out perfectly equal, you're entering the lottery. Again, the examiners are not given such detailed instructions on this. There's no, in fact, there's no real specification of different types of essays, like opinion essays, discussion essays, 2-question essays. Those words don't get used in the grading book at all. And the IELTS organization argues, oh, there aren't these type of questions. And in theory, there could be any type of question. But then in reality, there is. So, okay, so I'm going to move on, and but ask question now if you don't understand. No, I'm speaking quite quickly. I hope that's okay. But there will be a video if you want to review. And I hope you're kind of getting some insight into the examiner's brain and understand this point, that it's not always black and white, right and wrong. It's like I said, there's this element of subjectivity, of lottery, that some examiners might be okay with something and some might not. All right, informal words, the instructions are clearer on this. Let me show you something here, because let's just, while we're on vocabulary, I want to show you something, because sometimes people are asking me, well, how many informal words can I have? How many mistakes can I have? And so what I want to show you is it depends on this. the impacts of the errors is really what's important. How severe are they? What's the impact? How often do you make them? It's sort of these three factors together. So it's not really just about how many errors you've got or how severe they are. It's all these three things together. The impact is like the communicative impact. So if you make a mistake, but I understand what you mean, that's not so bad. If you make a mistake and I'm like, oh, what do you mean? And I'm confused, that's a problem. All right, so back to the question then. Informal words, yeah, try not to use them. I would think it's going to limit you to 7. If there's only 1, you could still get 8, but let's say there's a few, then 7, maybe 6. Probably not down to 5, just for informal words. So it's putting downward pressure every time you make a mistake on your vocab, and also the task response, because the task response has some consideration of the formality of the writing and the whether the writing is fitting the purpose and the task, right? So mostly affects the vocabulary, little bit of an impact on task response. 1 error is okay, 2, 3, it's starting to not be great. And while on the topic of informal words, sometimes people are using they're using high-level words, but they're not using them correctly. They don't fit the context, or we can say it's unnatural. There's unnatural uses of words that can also put some. They're not as serious as the informal words, but it puts downward pressure on your score for vocabulary and sometimes cohesion and coherence. Sometimes students are throwing out all these words, and they're great words, but they're not being used correctly. So they just start to lead to confusion. They start to push down cohesion and coherence and the vocabulary. So be careful how you learn and how you use high-level language. High-level language should be used to communicate, not just to show off language. All right. Yeah, so then how do you know? Another related question is, how do you know if a word's informal or not? You can Google it if you're not sure. Be careful with idiomatic expressions, and be careful with proverbs. So proverbs are like idiomatic expressions that give some kind of advice, like we have something like a stitch in time saves 9. So that just means doing something early is better than doing it later, because if you do it later, more effort's required. So I mean, they're good to use. It's a way of showing talent, right? Idiomatic language is a way to show talent. But if you get them wrong, then it's the opposite. If they're too informal or you make mistakes with them, that wouldn't be a good example. Idiomatic expressions. Oh yeah, here we go. These ones are all okay. And you use them a lot in task 1, right? Sales plunged. Well, you could talk about that in part 2, to cut down on something, cut back. So if you're talking about solutions, maybe the government should cut back on something. A grey area is a kind of an unclear area. A school of thought is a way of thinking about something. Like that would be a good idiomatic expression for some people believe this, other people believe that. You could say, well, there's another school of thought that thinks that it's better too. But then, yeah, I wish I could give you, I don't think I can. I can't just suddenly think of some idiomatic expressions and tell you if they're informal or not. Well, I could. If you told me some, I could. I'm just trying to think of an example. Just really that one that I had before. A lot of these things like a stitch in time saves 9, just like every coin has 2 sides. A lot of the idiomatic expressions are unsuitable. All right, so you've got to be careful with vocabulary, right? And you don't need too much to get a high score. wish I could, yeah, or just let me just think for a minute some of the idiomatic expressions from the speaking test. I'll think out loud. So keen on something, yeah, that'd be okay. Big fan of. I'm a big fan of soccer. I wouldn't use big fan in an essay. I wouldn't say these days many people are big fans of soccer. Keen on would be okay. Can't stand I'd use in speaking. I really can't stand. So something I don't like. These days, many people can't stand the internet, social media. Yeah, that'd be okay. I think that would be okay. There's, okay, another, if I'm on the speaking test, I might say, well, social media's not my cup of tea. I wouldn't write it in an essay. So you've got to be careful. If you're not sure, maybe you don't use those in the test. All right. So no other questions? Yeah, that's a good question. Like here, it's an interesting one. Either's fine. So you can use either American English or British English. You're not really supposed to mix the two in the same essay. It's not considered a good way of writing. How would that influence your score? I don't think it's a big problem until you start going up the grading criteria. And I've never really thought about that before. It's probably something to do with style or something like that. So I think it's not a spelling error. So I wouldn't call it a mistake. I wouldn't call it an outside error. It'd be, I think it would have a definite impact at the 8 level. All right. At the 7 level, it shouldn't be a problem. Even you wrote the same word, like let's say color, without a U and then with a U in the same essay, probably not such a big problem. If it was right in the same sentence, this is getting to be kind of what I would call like ugly English or something like that. It could, if it was really serious, it could result in a 6, I suppose. But I think probably it would be still possible to get a 7, but not really higher. Unless it was just one time, like one time, not a problem here. You're allowed to make some sort of errors. But I wouldn't say it's an error. It's not a spelling mistake. It's a kind of style thing that you shouldn't mix two together. Likely the examiner won't even, they won't even notice, most likely. Unless, as I said, it's the same word and it's close together in the essay. I wouldn't worry about that too much. In terms of your English learning, try and follow one system if you can, and then you're less likely to have that problem. In terms of the listening test and reading test, spelling matters, but then again, either one's okay, and even mixing them would be okay for that. But for the writing test, try and stick to one system. The American system's probably easier. I grew up on the British system. The American system's a bit more logical. Really, what I just want to kind of sum up what I think most people need to work on in terms of their essay writing is the planning. We talked about that already, how to plan your essays and look at some reliable model answers. Look at the question, plan your essay, and then read the essay. Did your plan make sense? Maybe when you read the answer, you're like, wow, I totally misunderstood what the topic was. Sometimes it could be just one word in the topic. Here, the ones at finance, that could be important. The people who are paying for buildings. So that you can do that. So that's a really useful thing to do with model answers. Then I know a lot of you are trying to build up vocabulary. You could plan some vocabulary for this topic too. And then you could read the model answer. Oh, I know what it is on vocabulary. So step 1, do your plan, read the essay. Did your plan make sense? And your structure, you should try and plan the structure, the way you're going to write it. Then what you could do is have a second reading and try and just notice some of the vocabulary that gets used. Try and notice some of the ways words get paraphrased. So like in this essay, government gets paraphrased to authorities. You could even brainstorm yourself too, because for me, that's a logical step in the planning that you might underline keywords like government, and then think of some words you know to rephrase government. At first it's quite hard, but we can talk about the authorities, right? So you can learn vocabulary. People who design buildings, architects. I've actually sort of highlighted some of the language in this essay, and at the end I've put some ideas about vocabulary. Then go on to the next one, do the same thing, plan it, how you're going to structure it, read it, see if your plan works, see if you would have structured it the same, and then you could think about vocabulary. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please like it so that will help this video to rank better and enable people such as yourself to see this video. Please subscribe to me if you'd like to get alerts of my upcoming videos as I produce them and as I upload them. Best of luck with your study in 2020.